Welcome in, everybody, to Fantasy Pros. This is the Fantasy Football Podcast. It is me, Joey P, Joe Pisapia, and today it's the first mock draft, at least for me. I don't know what y'all are doing out there in the mock draft streets, but the NFL draft is a few months away. So, of course, the hosts from our Dynasty podcast, Scott Bogman and Pat Fitzmaurice, my patty cakes, are here to help us go through the first round. The boys have the picks. They're in. We're ready to lock and load here. And, of course, go to FantasyPros.com for all the latest on the draft news, all the buzz, all the breakdowns. D-Bro just came back from the Senior Bowl. I can't wait to see him, and just a week from now here, we'll be hanging out together in Las Vegas on the team trip, and he's going to tell me about all these prospects that he saw, and he won't stop talking about it, I'm sure, the entire time we're there. Pat Fitzmaurice, Scott Bogman, I'm so glad you're here today, because I love this. This is like the official turn of the page to the 2025 season here officially, and I feel like once we start talking about these prospects, and there are some really good ones here on both sides of the ball, it gets me really excited for that fresh start of the season, because football never stops around here. That's why you subscribe to the YouTube channel of Fantasy Pros right now. Ring the bell till it goes ding for notifications. And of course, drop your comments below. What's your favorite picks? We love to hear from you. What's your favorite team going to do in the draft? Drop your predictions below. Let's start with the Tennessee Titans at the top of the board. Tennessee Titans, they earned that spot. They need quarterback, they need edge, they need tackle, wide receiver, safety. They need a lot. So, Pat Fitzmaurice, you're number one on the clock. Where do they go with all these needs?
Well, Joe, you're nowhere in the NFL if you don't have a quarterback. So I think the Titans are going to draft a quarterback. They're going to take Cam Ward, the quarterback from Miami, Florida. For the Titans, the 2024 season was basically a referendum on whether Will Levis should be their quarterback of the future. And I think it's safe to say that the Titans front office has voted no on that referendum. Now, I personally like Shedeur Sanders just a smidge more than I like Cam Ward, but Deion Sanders has mentioned that he would like to see Shedeur end up with the Raiders. I'm not sure how Coach Prime would feel about the Titans as a destination for his son. And it's not that big a gap between the top two quarterbacks in this draft, whichever your preference may be. So let's give the Titans Ward, who was terrific for Miami this past season, 4,300 passing yards, 39 touchdown passes, 9.5 yards per attempt. The pluses for this guy: sturdy NFL build, quick release, accuracy, escapability. The negatives: sometimes holds onto the ball a little too long, and ball security has been a little bit of an issue. Has a habit of sort of scrambling around one-handed while holding the ball at or below his waist. He only fumbled 3 times at Miami last year, but he fumbled 12 times in 12 games at Washington State in 2023 and lost 8 of those fumbles. So that is something that needs to be addressed. Still, I think this gives the Titans some optimism at the quarterback position.
Pat, I know he's the number one overall here, but a lot of the consensus out there in the scouting realms is that these guys would not necessarily be the front of last year's class. Is Cam Ward still a week 1 starter?
That's a good question, Joe. Whether any of the quarterbacks in this class are week 1 starters. If a guy goes 101, you would think the pressure
tough not to be,
would
right?
be pretty immense. Yeah, exactly. I think that would probably be the plan for whichever quarterback the Titans might take at 101.
All right. Scott Bogman up next, number 2 for the Cleveland Browns. Also a team with a lot of needs: quarterback, edge, tackle. They could use a little bit of everything there. Certainly maybe some running back help too. But it's early in the draft, and Scott Bogman, I know you're a defensive guy, so I'm thinking this is a defensive pick here.
Of course it is, and I think Abdul Carter is the best player in the draft, and that is maybe offensive to Travis Hunter stands, and I'm a Travis Hunter stan. I love him, but I think Abdul Carter, with what we saw him do in the playoff with one arm against these Notre Dame guys, basically an arm tied behind his back, was unbelievable. And I think that the Browns have to trade Myles Garrett. I think right now he's in the prime of his career. The Browns are a sinking ship. They have cap issues with Watson. They have quarterback issues with Watson. They have hampered their whole franchise by trading for Deshaun Watson. The way to get it back is to trade Myles Garrett for a haul of picks. And if you take him and then replace him with a stud like Abdul Carter here, then I think you're on the right track to rebuilding this franchise as a whole. So I don't think if you're in this position that the Browns are in, you can do anything but take BPA. I understand quarterback is an enormous issue. A lot of people want them to take Shedeur Sanders, but this is not a problem that is going to be solved overnight. Go BPA for this entire draft. Figure out your quarterback in the next couple seasons. And Abdul Carter would be the best guy there, specifically if they trade Garrett. So that's why
tremendous
I go with
talent.
Carter.
Can't miss.
Yes.
I agree. I'm with you 1,000% on him. Next up, the New York Football Giants. It's funny too, guys. Just when you're looking at this board, I don't remember the last time where every team had a pick in the first round, right?
Yes.
I mean, usually that's isn't that weird too? Like I was looking, I was like, is that true? How did that happen? No, I mean that's as of now. Of course, there could be some wacky stuff going on the next couple of weeks.
Yeah.
But even just to start off that way, usually some other trade from some other year creeping in. Some teams got 2 picks in the first, some teams got none. It's not like that this year. Everybody's got a trip to the dance. It's just really nice.
We went almost a decade without the Rams having their first round pick.
Right.
So,
Sean McVay's like, screw them picks. All right, let's get to the New York Football Giants. Spoiler alert, they also need quarterback. They certainly need line help and secondary help. So where do they go from here, Pat?
Again, the G-men could very well take a quarterback in this spot, Joe, but they could also acquire a veteran quarterback in March, maybe someone like Sam Darnold, maybe someone like Justin Fields. So while this pick could be Shedeur Sanders, I am going to give the Giants Shedeur Sanders' teammate, the guy I believe to be the best player in this draft, Travis Hunter. And Hunter is just a special talent, a two-way player who excels as both a cornerback and as a wide receiver. When he gets to the NFL, I don't think Hunter is going to play on both sides of the ball as often as he did in college. Just not feasible, at least not if Hunter wants to have a long-lasting career. So Hunter is primarily going to play cornerback for my Giants, and I suspect that Hunter probably will be primarily a cornerback wherever he lands in reality. Giants cornerback Adoree Jackson is about to become a free agent. They drafted cornerback Deonte Banks in the first round last year out of Maryland. Banks had a pretty uneven rookie season. Hunter is going to help stabilize the cornerback position for the Giants. He's going to be the shutdown guy, and if Banks takes a big step forward in year 2, now we're cooking. But don't you worry, we will get Hunter onto the field as a receiver too. I think the plan would be to use him as a fourth receiver, have him play about, 20%, 25% of the offensive snaps. And in crunch time, we will wish our opponents well in trying to cover both Malik Neighbors and Travis Hunter.
As Pat mentioned, free agency will have an impact on this first round and the rest of the draft too, but this is right now. We're living in the now of this draft and having some fun today. Next up is my New England Patriots here at the 4 spot. Bogman, I was hoping to get Carter. It did not happen, so who are you going to give me instead?
Yeah, I'm going to give you Will Campbell, the offensive tackle out of LSU. New England 31st in pass block grade last season.
You don't have to remind me.
3 sacks per game, 3.1. Only... Chicago, obviously, with Caleb Williams holding the ball. Cleveland, Houston, Minnesota, and Seattle allowed more sacks per game than your New England Patriots. You got Drake May. He can scramble, and I know you need targets, but I think there are targets later to get. There's not another Will Campbell in his pass blocking grade at this point in the second round of the draft. So let's go drop in our left tackle and at least have one to keep Drake May upright.
I'm happy with this. I sign off. You have my approval of 1,000% on this one. Protect your investment. Look, you got a quarterback in Drake May. Protect him, and then continue to have a good draft here. Coming up next at the 5 spot, the Jacksonville Jaguars, a perennial top 10 pick, it feels like, for most of my life at least. Pat, you're up next with this pick. Again, the needs here for the Jags are many. Looking for secondary help, interior offensive line, quarterback help, maybe if they want to move off. I don't know, but... certainly, at this point, a couple different ways you could go here with this one. So which way do you want to go for the Jacksonville Jaguars?
We will address that secondary need, Joe. The Jaguars still need help at cornerback. They needed help last year. I thought they were going to draft Terrion Arnold from Alabama, but the Jaguars passed on Arnold to draft Brian Thomas Jr. Turned out to be a great pick. A rare, shrewd move from former Jaguars general manager Trent Baalke. But that need at cornerback remains, and Jacksonville is going to address it by taking Will Johnson from the University of Michigan. Johnson is 6'2", has a physical style, so you can match him up with big receivers. Terrific at making plays on the ball. He's good in both man coverage and zone coverage. This is the ace cover man the Jaguars have been looking for ever since the departure of Jalen Ramsey 7 or 8 years ago.
Okay, so a cornerback certainly will go a long way there to help Jacksonville's defense. Coming up next at the 6th spot, the Las Vegas Raiders. Shedeur Sanders still on the board for now, Scott Bogman. The Raiders looking to turn over this organization. Pete Carroll's been brought in. They need help at wide receiver, at running back maybe as well, corner. But the QB situation, Shedeur's out there. Is that the pick?
I mean, this is the easiest pick in the draft, Joe. If Shedeur Sanders falls to the Raiders, he is definitely going to be a Raider. And it makes a lot of sense. Like, I think Gardner Minshew and Aiden O'Connell are fine backup quarterbacks, but you can't play this dance where one of these guys is starting for the whole season. We saw it last year, and Pete Carroll's going to come in here, and the best thing about Pete Carroll is, and we know it, this will be a meritocracy. Whoever plays the best in the preseason and in camp and in practice will win starting jobs all throughout this roster. So if you draft Sanders and he ain't ready, then Russell Wilson will probably end up being the starting quarterback for the Raiders this season. So you won't have to go through this. Yes, as a top 10 pick, he will start at the end of the year for sure. But if he's not ready, Pete Carroll's not going to hand him to the Wolves. But if he's ready, he will play just like Russell Wilson did. So I think you bring in another vet. Maybe they just stick with Gardner Minshew. I think we'll see a little bit of roster movement at this position for the Raiders, though. So I think that bringing in Sanders, a guy that can feed the ball to Brock Bowers, he knows the game plan. Yes, he makes mistakes. Pat and I talked about him. He does drop back a little bit too much, a la Caleb Williams, but they will try to drum that bad habit right out of him, make him step up in the pocket and throw the ball. Jacoby Myers is a good target still, and they are going to be addressing some of these needs as well in free agency and with their other picks in the draft. So they just need a head of the offense, and Sanders could easily be a plug-and-play guy from day one. And like I said, if he ain't ready, Carroll will not force-feed him to you. It is all a meritocracy with Carroll.
Well, maybe that opens up our redemption story and arc for Matt Flynn all those years later, right? Can bring back Matt Flynn, have him sign.
What is he doing now? He's gonna.
I don't know.
From State Farm,
hey,
here
man,
comes Matt Flynn.
That guy signed a pretty good contract. Now, best job. Never had to do anything.
Chase Daniels.
That's right. The New York Jets are up next at 7. Pat, that goes back to you. The Jets could certainly need. I think they're going to go defense with this pick. Personally, I think it's either the secondary or defensive tackle. What did you give him here?
Yeah, you said it, Joe. I mean, they could take an offensive lineman here. They've got some aging tackles, but the Jets also have a lot of defensive backs who are about to hit free agency. Cornerbacks DJ Reed and Isaiah Oliver, and safeties Chuck Clark and Tony Adams, although I think Adams might be a restricted free agent. But still, let's keep that secondary stocked with talent by giving the Jets Malaki Starks, the outstanding safety from Georgia. He would team with Sauce Gardner to give the Jets 2 big-time playmakers in the secondary. Starks is just terrific athlete. He's versatile. I think he could play either strong or free safety. And if the Jets do lose Isaiah Oliver in free agency, the Jets could probably play Starks as a slot corner. Malaki Starks just has a nose for the ball. Good in coverage, has the speed to run with wide receivers, excellent run support. I generally don't think it's a good idea to spend a top 10 pick on a safety unless that player is special. Well, Malaki Starks is pretty special.
All right, we'll see if we can get a special player here. Number 8 for the Carolina Panthers up next. Now, the Panthers, obviously, it feels like they've turned the corner at the quarterback position. That's a good thing, especially for this year's draft. Looking at edge, perhaps, some wide receiver help, defensive tackle. What do you think, Boggs? Where do you go here for this one for the Panthers?
We're going DT. I'm going to give him Mason Graham, the big defensive tackle from Michigan. Obviously, we know that Michigan had a great run defense the last few years, and famously, Ohio State tried to run the ball up the gut on them and lost that game against Michigan, one of the most improbable losses in that rivalry. Mason Graham was a big reason, and looking at the Carolina Panthers run defense, 32nd in the NFL last season, dead last, and Derek Brown tore up his knee, so I don't know when
poor Debro,
their Debro is going to come back for for the Panthers next season and play. Is it going to be early? Is he going to take a little bit longer? That's a huge loss. He was like their one good defensive player. So they need a team leader, and for all the issues that they had on offense, and yes, they were bad, the defense was way worse last year, and that is the thing holding them back, and they need to build it from the inside out.
Yeah, and they played a lot of close games there in the second half, too. They were hanging with a lot of teams. So you can fix that defense a little bit. Maybe you start winning some of those closer games. That could be the case. All right, before we get to the next pick, I want to remind everybody we got free stuff to give away. And if you want a chance to win a signed Mike Evans Buccaneers helmet for free, courtesy of our friends at pristineauction.com, all you need to do is head to fantasypros.com/contest, complete the form, and either download the Fantasy Pros My Playbook app, leave a review for the podcast, or follow us on X, Instagram, or TikTok at Fantasy Pros. The more actions you complete, the more entries you'll receive, and we'll be announcing the winner right here on the podcast. So if you're watching on YouTube, be sure to subscribe, turn on those notifications so you can be alerted when new episodes are up, and you can claim your prize. Okay, next up here, after the Carolina Panthers pick, the New Orleans Saints are up next. They need a lot of things, but I think the Fountain of Youth, Pat, would be the best selection for the New Orleans Saints. So let's start getting younger with these picks. What are we going to do?
Yes, Joe. And things have been pretty chalky in our mock to this point, so let's erase the chalk with this pick. I think the Saints have to go defense. Their run D was atrocious last year. Their pass rush was okay, but Cameron Jordan's going to be 36 next season. Chase Young is going to be a free agent. The Saints are going to look for run stoppers in this draft, but first, they are going to get an explosive edge rusher in Mike Green, who was a standout in the Senior Bowl practices. I think pre-Senior Bowl, Green was widely projected to go in the second half of the first round. But surprise, surprise, after his phenomenal week down in Mobile, Green sneaks into the top 10 here with the Saints. He had 17 sacks for Marshall last year. He was the first Marshall player to be a first-team All-American since Randy Moss. Green just has an explosive first step. He is tall and rangy and can really bend in the edge, but Green is also a surprisingly physical player with heavy hands. The Saints' defensive retooling starts with one of the best edge rushers in this draft class, Mike Green.
Next up here at number 10 is the Chicago Bears. Now, obviously, Boggs, offensive line is the giant need here. But that's no fun. Boggs, what did you give the Bears?
Well, look, I think if you want to help your quarterback, obviously the O-line is huge. Getting targets is big, but they have targets. We didn't even see. We have not scratched the surface of what Rome Odunze can do.
100% agreed. Yes.
Super excited
Love him
about him.
He's being drafted right now, I think, 37 overall wide receiver, and I think that's criminal right now. I think that's just because people are waiting to see the Keenan Allen situation. I think it's a placeholder ranking, but I do think that's going to change relatively quickly.
Yeah, so we've seen Ben Johnson with DeAndre Swift. There's a reason he's in Chicago now, right? It's because he wasn't that good in the Ben Johnson offense. So let's give them Ashton Jeanty, the quote unquote generational type running back from Boise State. I don't know if I want to call him generational. I know Fitz has mentioned this. He's not Bijan. He's not Saquon. He's not that guy, but I would put him right underneath those guys. My comp for him, and I hate comps. I'm not a big comp guy. I like to watch the guy play and say, all right, he's his own guy. Who does he remind me of? Mini Marshawn Lynch, just a shorter Marshawn Lynch. The body control, this dude is like a damn pinball. It is impossible to bring him down. He's been hit high. He's been hit low. He shrugs off tackles. He's great with the ball in his hand. He's explosive. And just listen to the numbers and watch jaws drop. 374 rushing yards, or rush attempts. 2,601 yards, 29 touchdowns, along with 23 catches, 138 yards. And the year before, he had 43 catches. This dude can catch the ball out of the backfield. So how do you help Caleb Williams besides getting him offensive lineman? You get him the best running game you possibly can. That's what helped Jared Goff in Detroit. That's what helped the pass game a lot. So give the ball to Ashton Jeanty 25 times a game and don't worry about it. Plug him right in and watch him go. I am super excited about him. I think this would be a really nice landing spot with this new offensive system coming in.
Detroit was willing to be aggressive with Jahmyr Gibbs in the draft a few years ago. So it's not absurd to think they could take Jeanty here. My only question about Jeanty, you mentioned that workload, 374 attempts, right? Like, that's a lot. Any concerns about the workload that he's had in college? Because sometimes we've seen that by the time these guys get to the pros, they're a little burnt. Any concern there?
I understand the overarching concern. He just never slowed down, right? Mm-hmm. That was the thing. Right. It's like if he had been nicked up or questionable to play games or, slowing down at the end or whatever, then I would say, okay, this guy just never missed a beat. So I won't say it's affecting him until I see it's him being affected by it. So I didn't see any of that. I'm not worried about it.
Next up, the San Francisco 49ers here. Now, the Bears in this draft did not take the offensive lineman, which means Banks is still on the board here, Pat. They could use some help at guard, linebacker, edge. I mean, there's a lot of needs here. Cornerback here for the San Francisco 49ers. So what would you give them here at 11?
Yeah, this one's pretty easy, Joe. The 49ers could use offensive line help. I mean, left tackle Trent Williams turns 37 in August. So they are going to take Kelvin Banks of Texas as the heir apparent to Trent Williams. Banks has been a 3-year starter at left tackle for the Longhorns, and he is remarkably athletic for a 6'4", 320-pound human being. I think he'd be a perfect fit for Kyle Shanahan's offense, which values offensive linemen who can get to the second level. Yeah, Banks is just a great fit here. So let's give the 49ers Kelvin Banks from Texas.
To the Cowboys at 12. Let's see what Jerry Jones is going to come up with here from Scott Bogman.
Ted McMillan, the wide receiver out of Arizona. And, they just don't have anybody on the other side of CeeDee Lamb right now. And I know the running game is missing as well, depending on who you ask. Some people really like Rico. Didn't seem like they really liked Rico last year, or else they would have given him the ball a little bit more. But they need another outside presence. Ted McMillan is an enormous wide receiver, 6'5", tracks the ball well, gets the ball with his hands, enormous catch radius. The only thing that you worry about with a guy of his size is maybe he doesn't have that type of speed, but didn't slow him down against any of his competition. Had some enormous years for Arizona, 84 catches, 1,319 yards, and 8 touchdowns this year. Had a more healthy year the year before, 90 catches, 1,402 and 10. The dude is an immediate presence, the dude that can turn the ball from a 50-50 to a 70-30, and that's exactly what they could use, is just rolling coverage towards Tet to get CD a couple more one-on-ones, and that would make him even more dangerous. So I really think getting a second target should be the Cowboys' priority.
If Jeanty should slide to the Cowboys, I'd be shocked if they didn't take him. And if Jerry Jones really wants him, I also wouldn't be shocked if he trades up to like 7 where the Jets are, and the Jets take some more draft picks and continue to figure some things out there in order to leapfrog if they think they get wind that Chicago might take him. Next up here at 13, the Miami Dolphins. Pat Fitzmaurice, back to you. Disappointing year for the Dolphins. Last season, they could use some help on defense at the tackle positions, maybe safety, linebacker, or you could always go with another offensive lineman. Where do you want to go?
We will go with another offensive lineman, Joe. Armand Membou of Missouri. So Miami really needs offensive line help, especially at guard. Membou was a tackle at Missouri. He's 6'3", 314 pounds. He does have 34-inch arms, so he probably could stay at tackle, but he could also move inside to guard. Membou has a rare combination of power and athleticism. He's an early declarer, and yet he started 30 games for Mizzou in his 3 years there. So Membou, I think, would be a nice start for the Dolphins in their effort to patch up that offensive line.
Next up after the Dolphins at 14, the Indianapolis Colts. Colts team that was 2 years ago in the playoffs, this year on the outside looking in. They could use some interior offensive line help. Go with tight end here. There's a great tight end on the board. Corner, linebacker, safety. Lots of ways the Colts can go. So, Boggs, what do you want to give him here?
Real quick, just not surprised that Fitzy wanted the O-line to help with all of his Devin Achane shares. So not surprised at that at all. But for the Colts, let's give them Tyler Warren. They had big ties to Brock Bowers. They tried to move up last season and grab him. And I'm not going to sit here and tell you that Tyler Warren is Brock Bowers, because he's not. That's why Fitz and I were so big on Brock Bowers last season. But Tyler Warren is a stud. He is going to be the first tight end off the board, no doubt. We also like Colston Loveland from Michigan, but I think Tyler Warren can drop in here. And what do you need if you're Anthony Richardson? You already have very good wide receiver targets. This is it. I mean, there's nothing else you can do more to help Anthony Richardson outside of maybe some O-line play, but now he's got Pittman. Now he's got Downs. Jonathan Taylor's in the backfield. You have two options in Mitchell and Pearce, who were both solid last season. If you drop Tyler Warren in here, then you go, all right, if you can't succeed with these targets and weapons, you can't succeed. That is it. You give Anthony Richardson no outs. You give him everything he could possibly use, and you start throwing the ball with force. If he can get it done, this offense is going to be very, very scary. So I think you just make everything a little bit easier for Anthony Richardson. They obviously need a lot of defensive help as well. I easily could have gone there, but the ties to Brock Bowers and the want for a big target over the middle like Tyler Warren is what made me go with him here for the Colts.
All right, next up, the Atlanta Falcons at 15. They've got some different needs here. The Falcons aren't far off here. I think this one's simple, Pat. I'm looking for pass rush. What are you looking for?
Yep. It seems like the Falcons are perpetually in need of pass rushers, Joe. And, well,
nice alliteration, Pat.
Yeah. They are definitely in need of a pass rusher again. They had the second fewest sacks in the league last year, just 31, and they ranked 29th in pressure rates. Enter Mykel Williams of Georgia. So Williams only had 5 sacks this past season for Georgia, 14 sacks across his 3 seasons with the Bulldogs. But I think Mykel Williams is a little like Trayvon Walker was coming out of Georgia a few years ago. Like, Walker didn't post big sack numbers in college either, but he was an athletic freak with big-time upside. Lo and behold, Trayvon Walker had double-digit sacks for the Jaguars in 2 straight seasons after being the number 1 overall pick in 2022. Mykel Williams looks like he came out of an edge rusher lab. Like, he's long and twitchy, powerful and athletic, powerful hands. Georgia thought Williams was versatile enough that he moved around the formation. They'd occasionally line him up inside, like over the center. So Mykel Williams has big-time upside. I think he's the perfect fit for the Falcons.
All right, next up here at 16, Scott Bogman's on the clock for the Arizona Cardinals. Expectations, I feel like, last year for the Arizona Cardinals, and they fell a little short there. They could also use some edge rush, so unfortunately that pick might have hurt them. Defensive tackle. Look, they took a wide receiver last year. I don't think they're going to go that route. And then at the end of the day, everybody could always use help on the O-line. So, Boggs, what do you want to do here for the Cardinals?
I think this is one of my hardest picks, honestly, is that do we want to get a second outside presence here on offense, or do we want to just keep improving this defense? Because I think the defense is the weakness of this team. They do have, you re-sign James Conner, you have Trey Benson there, Marvin Harrison. I think we all expect him to take a step up in his sophomore season. And Trey McBride came through specifically in the back half. So I think the offense is okay. I'm going to go with James Pearce, the edge rusher out of Tennessee. This team, I believe, was 28th, 27th in pressure percentage last season, just not putting a lot of pressure on the quarterback. They did end up with 41 sacks, which was a decent number, but I think just putting a presence like James Pearce on this line to help with everything. He can do a little bit of everything, run defense and getting towards the quarterback, I think is the most prudent pick for the Cardinals.
Before we get to the next pick on the board, this ain't the little teeny weeny title bowl. This is the Super Bowl that we're going to be playing here this weekend, and get into the action on DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of Super Bowl 59. If you're ready to place your first bet, try betting on something simple, like a player to score 6. Go to DraftKings Sportsbook app to make your pick today. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app, and when you do, use that promo code FantasyPros. That's FantasyPros, and new customers, you get $200 in bonus bets instantly when you bet just $5 only on DraftKings Sportsbook. The crown is yours. Next up here, the Cincinnati Bengals have a pretty high pick here at 17 by their standards lately. A year that was disappointed, marred by some bad defense. So are we going to fix the defensive side of this team here, Pat Fitzmaurice?
No, Joe. I've been taking a lot of linemen lately. I want to have some fun. So I'm going to give the Bengals Luther Burden, the wide receiver from Missouri. This one just makes too much sense. The Bengals aren't going to be able to re-sign T. Higgins. They're going to have to find a new running mate for Jamar Chase, and I don't know if Andre Iosivas is that guy. So after a 1,200-yard season for Missouri in 2023, Burden's numbers really fell off in 2024, but the Missouri offense kind of struggled at times, especially when quarterback Brady Cook was hurt. Burden is just so quick. Like, this guy creates instant separation off the snap, and when he has the ball in his hands, Burden is flat out electric. Like, this guy strings together these ankle-breaking moves. My comp for him isn't even a football comp, Joe. Like, the way Burden strings moves together reminds me of Allen Iverson. Like, Burden is just slippery, yeah. So
hopefully he likes to practice more.
Good point. He also has really good contact balance for a smaller receiver, and despite being only 5'11", Burden is one of these guys who makes contested catches, like punches above his weight, or I should say height, in that department, kind of like Tyreek Hill. I mean, this dude makes some circus catches. So let's pair Burden with Jamar Chase and keep Joe Burrow well-stocked with pass-catching weaponry.
Short kings catching footballs. I like it. I'm in for it. Jack Sawyer up next is the pick that Bogman puts in for the Seattle Seahawks. So let's talk about this one. Looking for Seattle to get a little bit better on the pass rush, I assume, here, Boggs.
Yeah, and I think they were okay in the pass rush last season, but I think what Jack Sawyer does at this point is he brings identity to this defense. And, this has not been the same defense since the 12th man and Bobby Wagner and Cam Chancellor and all of those guys. I think what you get with Jack Sawyer is a leader, a guy with high motor. He's going to be out there every single play. He can play standing up. He can play with his hand in the dirt. He'll do whatever they ask him to do. Obviously made the big play against my Longhorns in the semifinals there. But this dude will bring identity and heart and motor to this defense, which I just feel like has been lacking. This is a crowd that is ready to go nuts at every single play. They are ready to be the 12th man, and the Seahawks just really haven't brought it on the defensive side recently. So could they use some corners? Yes. I think offensive line may be a bigger need for them. I just don't think there's a player here that jumps off the page to me that they have to have. So for me, give me Jack Sawyer, and let's bring some identity and motor to this defense.
3 of the last 4 picks here on the board, edge rushers. So we'll see what the Tampa Bay Buccaneers do next at 19. The run has happened. Do we want to keep going with this run here, Pat, or we want to pivot to something else?
Yeah, we do, Joe. Nick Scourton, the edge from Texas A&M.
Ooh.
So, yeah, an Aggie. I had to do it just to annoy Bogman, the Longhorns fan. But the Bucs could use another defensive end to play opposite Yaya Diaby on that defensive line. Scourton's kind of he's not really like a true bendy edge rusher, one of these lighter guys. He's 6'4", 285. So Scourton's kind of a power edge player, really good motor. And I think he only turned 20 a few months ago. So he was a teenager for most of his college career. There's a lot of growth potential for Nick Scourton. I think he'd be a good fit with the Bucs.
Next up here at 20, the Denver Broncos. Boggs, let's talk about the Broncos' needs here. Could use a tight end, but the big tight end is off the board here. A wide receiver help, perhaps. Maybe linebacker, maybe safety. Where do you want to go here for the Broncos?
No, we're going to that tight end. We're going to give him Colston Loveland out of Michigan.
Okay.
And
you guys really like him. Yeah,
I love this pick for him. And Colston Loveland, I mean, I made this point. Fitz really enjoyed it on the Dynasty show. Like, if we're going to give Loveland a hard time for not playing well and having production with the Michigan offense, that'd be like getting mad at my skateboard for not doing air tricks, right? Like, I'm not getting it off the ground. It's a user issue. It is not the skateboard's problem.
That's a good enough bit to bring back to 2 shows. I was a little worried. I was like, I don't want you to do the same material on this show that you did on the other show. But that's a good one. That was a good line.
But I just think Loveland, he's got a little bit of Jeremy Shockey in him. Get the ball in his hands, let him run with it, and run some dudes over. Like, he is great with the ball in his hands. He is definitely a receiving tight end. He can block. He's got that motor. He's got that intensity for sure. Missed some time this year, which I think maybe keeps him behind Tyler Warren, but definitely a do-it-all tight end that could bring a great pass-catching presence to any team. And I think with the Broncos, we're really looking for pass catchers. Bo Nix was great last year, but all he really had was Cortland Sutton. Marvin Mims started to come around late, but let's give him that option over the middle and put Loveland on this team. I think
especially
it's
for a young QB. Fit. I like that a lot. I think that's a really, really sound pick there.
Joe, can I jump in with a quick point about Loveland versus Warren?
Sure, please. Absolutely.
I mean, Bog, you said you're pretty certain that Warren goes first. I don't know. I mean, Warren's 24 and Loveland is 20. So I think if any of the tight end needy teams are looking at that age thing and are kind of worried about, getting a guy who's 4 years older than the next best guy, that's the reason I think there's a decent chance Loveland is actually the first tight end taken.
Well, I guess it also depends on what team's doing it, right? I mean, Indianapolis is, hopefully getting back into competing next year. So I don't think taking Warren is an absurd idea.
No.
And, if somebody doesn't because of the age, okay. That's fair enough, but certainly a good point there that Pat's making. Boy, Jeremy Shockey, there's a name I haven't thought of in a long time. I would often wonder if Jeremy Shockey had his head screwed on properly, what he could have been, because he was a magnificent talent, especially in that era too, where it was just the beginning of the opening up of the offenses in the NFL. You know, imagine now what he would be. It would be fun. All right, next up here is the Pittsburgh Steelers. We can't let Bogman make that pick. So, Pat, do it for him. What do you want to give him here? I don't imagine they're addressing quarterback through the draft here. Maybe corner or maybe a new running back since they're not going to have any next year. I don't know. What do you want to do?
We're going to go with the wide receiver, and I think I'm going to make Bogman happy with this one. I'm going to give him Emeka Egbuka, the wide receiver from Ohio State. The Steelers need help at receiver, and Egbuka is a slot receiver with a really high floor. I think he's virtually bust-proof. Like, Egbuka is a very advanced route runner and good after the catch. I love how quickly he gets into his routes and makes these sharp cuts. Seems to understand leverage, which is part of what makes him such a good slot man. Just sets up for these moves, gets his defenders like leaning the wrong way, and then bang, makes his break and separates. So George Pickens needs help. Let's give him a running mate with Emeka Egbuka.
22, we have the Los Angeles Chargers. I would say a resounding success in year one for Harbaugh returning to the NFL. I don't know about you, Boggs, but you got this team to the playoffs. They were a joke last year. You addressed the offensive line last year. We know Harbaugh wants to run the football. So what does he do here? Does he finally go ahead and take that big ticket running back and go all in here, Boggs? Or does he do something maybe to solidify more on the defensive side of the football?
I mean, General Manager Bogman would, for sure. Give me Omari and Hampton for the Chargers because I don't want to play this dance between J.K. Dobbins and Gus Edwards and Kamani Vidal and all of these guys anymore. Give me a big, violent, downhill runner in Omari and Hampton to just dominate. And, I mean, I wish we saw more Justin Herbert. Obviously, his final performance was miserable against the Texans. We watched half of it on the BP YouTube.
We enjoyed that together.
Yeah, that was a lot of fun. But yes, especially after having so few in the regular season.
I know.
Such a
he had more in that
performance.
game than he had all year, right? I mean,
and they need targets, right? I think Loveland would be a great fit here and a Michigan guy. I think that fit almost writes itself in. But playing the dance between all of these running backs last season, we know the O-line is good. We know that Justin Herbert is good. It's the skill positions that this team needs, and I think Hampton is the best guy left on the board, and he can carry a big, big workload for this team, which is exactly what Harbaugh wants. Yeah. So give him his battering ram. I would love to see it.
He seems like the stylistic guy for Harbaugh.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm with you, man. I like this pick a lot. All right, next up, it's nice to see not one but two running backs in the first round. What year is this? Was it 2004? What's going on here?
Hey, listen, with what Saquon and Derrick Henry did, I think opinions on paying these guys. And Bijan and Gibbs. Like, I think that the opinion of let's wait to take a running back, I think that's kind of being rewound a little bit and reeled in.
Well, it is, and especially because the quarterback play has been subpar because they've had a lot of inexperienced quarterback play and a lot of more mobile quarterback play that hasn't necessarily been the most advanced quarterback play. You're seeing almost a regression in the style of offense now that you're seeing. You're seeing a lot more college-ish style stuff going on here. And everything is cyclical in the NFL, but it definitely feels like this past season was a reawakening. Even Jacobs had a good year, right, going to Green Bay. Speaking of the Green Bay Packers, look at that transition. Only a professional could do that. The Green Bay Packers up at 23. Pat Fitzmaurice, you're on the board. Nobody knows better than you the needs of the Packers. Certainly corner, edge, D-tackle. What do you want to do here?
Wide receiver Alec Ayomanor from Stanford. And, Joe, it was 5 months ago that wide receiver seemed like an area of strength for the Packers. Now it is a 5-alarm fire. Christian Watson tore his ACL. Jaden Reed didn't really take the next step forward after a promising rookie year. Dontavian Wicks didn't take a step forward either. And Romeo Doubs probably best suited to be a 3 receiver, not a 1 or a 2. So,
real quick on that, Pat. You can't say that the Packers are a 5-alarm fire with Joe hosting the show here in his Patriots wide receiver core.
Yeah,
and then
point.
My wide receiver core for the Steelers. Give me a break.
All right, well, a 3-alarm fire.
It's a
yeah.
I think if you go inside the wide receiver room of the Patriots is actually one of those things where you see those little tumbleweeds going by, like in the Old West stuff. That to me feels like more realistic for them. But Pat's not wrong. I mean, look, you want Jordan Love to succeed. The wide receiver room it went from, hey, this is a really deep group, to, hey, maybe this group is really not so good.
Who is number one? That is my big question.
Nobody.
Who is number one in Green Bay?
So Pat is ignoring all the needs on the defensive side, going for offense, just like a fantasy guy would. I respect it.
You guys do make a good point about the Patriots and Steelers having thinner wide receiver corps. We'll downgrade this to a 3-alarm fire. We do not need to call in fire departments from neighboring municipalities for this one, but we do need to give the Packers more help there. So Alec Ayomanor it is. Ayomanor's this big, powerfully built possession receiver with a big catch radius. I love how he just eats up yardage after the catch with these big, long strides. And, man, he is really hard to tackle, just a load to try to bring down. And Ayomanor's a ferocious blocker, and that's actually something the Packers really value in their wide receivers. And also, Alec Ayomanor is from Medicine Hat, Alberta, so I don't think the chilly temperatures of December and January home games in Green Bay are going to bother him too much.
Yes, and he'll say sorry every chance he gets. 24, the Minnesota Vikings up next. I think this one's pretty clear. Pretty much every corner that's on that roster is a free agent this year. So is that where we're going here, Boggs?
Yeah, let's give him Jedi Barron, the Thorpe Award winner. Of course, hook him, too. Let's go. Yeah, they gave up the fifth most passing yards, over 4,000 yards passing. And, this is going to happen for a team with a high offensive output as they have, right? And obviously Justin Jefferson is enormous. Jordan Addison took a huge step up. We got a healthy Hawkinson on the back end, plus a little bit of a lack of the run game. Aaron Jones getting a little bit older. I know some mocks have a replacement running back going here to the Vikings, but I just, they've been trying to address this and it hasn't worked, and they have some free agents, and this is one of the better players left on the board, and it fits my homer narrative. I think everything fits here for me to take Barron here for the Vikings.
Let's see what fits for the Texans. A nice playoff run for them after kind of a weird but successful regular season. Perhaps wide receiver for them too. I don't know. Where do you want to go here for Houston? I mean, I guess you could always go offensive line. They could certainly use some help there, Pat.
I don't think they've still run the Cards up to the podium anymore, Joe. But if they did, I think the Texans would dash to the podium to take Josh Simmons, the offensive tackle from Ohio State. Their offensive line was just catastrophically bad in 2024, and it kept C.J. Stroud from being his best. Like, the Texans allowed a 27.2% pressure rate, which was highest in the league, and gave up 54 sacks, third most in the league. Simmons is coming off a season-ending knee injury, hence the fall down to the latter part of the first round. If not for that injury, he might be a top 10 pick. Simmons is just this prototypical left tackle, huge wingspan, nice athleticism for a big guy, just what the Texans need.
The Rams up next at 26. Now Scott Bogman and Cooper Kupp getting run out of town. Is it time to replace him here?
I think so. And by the way, this is just falling right into my lap with my Longhorns narrative here. But Matthew Golden, I think, would fit in this offense perfectly. I think he's a great complement to what Puka Nacua does. A guy that uses his speed mirrored with his feet. He sets up these corners with his feet, and he can stop and start on a dime. He's going to crush that three-cone drill at the combine if he even decides to run it. I don't know why he would need to. But this is a dude with a great change of direction skill. I think that's going to be perfect for a guy like Stafford. And, Puka is a guy that you can just throw the ball up to and let him, his catch radius is going to do the rest of the work for you. And you're going to get a lot of separation with Matthew Golden. So I think he fits exactly what this Rams team needs, and especially if they do end up trading Cooper Kupp.
I don't want to blow sunshine up your rear end, but I love Matthew Golden. I'm a huge fan.
Yeah, I really watched a lot of him in the tourney, didn't you?
I did. I watched a ton, and I loved him in that game against ESU. Oh, he's just so good. Like, it's just, I don't know, man. Like, he made some catches in that game, and I was like, that guy has a nose for the end zone. He, like you said, catch radius is really impressive. Like, it is a nice compliment to Puka Nacua in that offense too. Theoretically, I actually really like that duo. That would get me that's a very exciting landing spot for me from a fantasy nerd standpoint. I'd like to see it. Baltimore up next at 27. Pat, you're on the clock.
Baltimore's going to take Shamar Stewart, an edge player from Texas A&M, and this is just a classic Ravens pick. Sit in your spot late in the first round
BPA.
and catch the falling value. Exactly. But like it might be more than BPA for Baltimore. They actually need help on the edge, and Stewart is just this big physical specimen with vast untapped upside. He's 6'5", 281, with an 83-inch wingspan, and it looks like this dude was chiseled out of granite. Like, he is just an absolute physical specimen. So Shamar Stewart also had a great week of practice at the Senior Bowl that probably clinched his first-round status. I would love to see him go to the Ravens, a team that's kind of pretty apt to get the most out of a high-upside player like this.
Next up, the Lions at 28. Now, Scott Bogman, you have him taking an edge here, which is really interesting. So is that a concern about Hutchinson's return or just trying to give him some more help on the other side?
Yeah, it's not really. It has nothing to do with Aiden Hutchinson's return. I think Aiden Hutchinson is going to be back, but it is what we saw after they started losing guys left and right last season, right? It's just the depth of this team. It's very good almost everywhere, but Jesus, they could not stay healthy on this defensive line to save their lives. Everybody got banged up. So I think just adding depth and a guy across from Hutchinson to take a little bit of the pressure off, specifically coming off a massive catastrophic injury like he did just have, I think is the best move for this team. They are really locked up on the offensive side, don't need a ton of help. Maybe, some of the O-line is getting a little bit old, but I think the defense and getting the depth there in case what happens, which doesn't seem like it's possible. Would they end up with like 21 defensive players on the IR or some ridiculous number last season? So yeah, I just think getting some depth there is going to be exactly what we want for Detroit.
Real quick, why him and not, say, Jalen Walker, who is a little bit more position flexibility, like if you're looking for depth, just out of curiosity?
Yeah, because I don't want flexibility. I want the dude that needs to play the position. I want the specific area. Yeah.
Okay, I just didn't know if you wanted like depth guys and being able to move guys around if you're, worrying about guys coming back.
I think as a worky, how I always screw his name up. I'm thinking of Levi Onyeworky. Ezraku. I think he is a very good player that will complement Hutchinson very, very well. And I think he might be BPA here. So I think it's a good pick for the Lions.
Washington Commanders up next here, Pat. Great year for the Commanders. So what do you want to do to help them get back to the playoffs in 2025?
We'll give them cornerback Benjamin Morrison of Notre Dame. So Washington needs more help at cornerback. Their first-round selection of the spindly Emmanuel Forbes 2 years ago was pretty much a disaster. They traded for Marshawn Lattimore this year, but Lattimore's best days are pretty clearly behind him, and he's almost certain to be cut in the offseason. Mike Sandra still their second-round pick last year. Really nice find, but I think he's at his best as a slot corner, and the Commanders were sort of forced to use him outside for much of this past season. Let's give the Commanders a true outside corner in Benjamin Morrison, regarded as an excellent technician who should be able to make a meaningful contribution right away, not a project. Let's just give this Washington defense an instant jolt with a NFL-ready player.
Next up, the Buffalo Bills at 30. I would think Boggs got to go on the defensive side of the football here, right?
Yeah, let's stop the run, and let's get them a big defensive tackle in Walter Nolan out of Ole Miss, a dude that can do a little bit of everything. They just don't have a lot of depth on the interior of the defensive line. Quentin Jefferson, Jordan Phillips, Austin Johnson are all UFAs. Right now it's Ed Oliver and Daquan Jones, and not a lot of experience behind those guys, DeJuan Carter and Zion Loge. So I think just getting some depth here and a potential starter would be a prudent move for the Bills. So let's give them Walter Nolan.
2 picks remain. The Philadelphia Eagles at 31. Pat, we're back to you. Great year for the Eagles. And, of course, talking about BPA, Howie certainly knows how to find talent in drafts.
Yeah, what do we give the team that has everything? There just aren't a lot of screaming needs for the Eagles, but they could probably use another edge player. They might be able to use another linebacker. And we know the Eagles like defenders from the University of Georgia. So you referenced him just a minute ago, Joe. Jalen Walker, the combination edge linebacker from Georgia, primarily a linebacker. Like he could play the middle, he could be the Sam linebacker, but also has the versatility to play on the edge on passing downs. He's just this thick, well-built dude, but also rangy, has a real nose for the ball. I think the rich are going to get richer here with Howie Roseman picking up Jalen Walker toward the end of the first round.
And then the
Joe,
Kansas Chiefs.
we had to save the Georgia guy for Philly, of course.
Of course.
So,
I mean,
it just made too much sense. I couldn't give him to the Lions.
Talk about a one-way transfer portal. Jeez. Let's go 32 Kansas City Chiefs. Boggs. Now the Chiefs, certainly have a couple different ways they can go here. Where do you want to go to close out this first round?
Let's give him Kenneth Grant. I mean, another team that just sits and takes the best player on the board and just the rich get richer, right? And they do have a need at this position as well. Obviously, Chris Jones, best in the NFL, but behind him, Wharton, Pennell, Nandi, Tupelotu, all UFAs going into the offseason. So maybe they get one or two of those guys back. They're definitely not getting all of them. They're going to get paid by some teams here. So I think Kenneth Grant slipping to this spot would be ridiculous, but there's a lot of good players. So I think it's definitely in the cards, and it could be a possibility. So just give them another run stopper, and the rich get richer.
There you have it, everybody. That's the first round. There'll be many more rounds to come here in the months ahead. Make sure you subscribe to the Fantasy Pros YouTube channel and the podcast. And on the YouTube channel, ring the bell till it goes ding for notifications so you don't miss any of our live streams, our podcasts, and our NFL draft content here, because we are just a few months away from the NFL draft. We're going to have stuff around the combine. We're going to have all kinds of content here, and we'll be live for the draft yet again, just like every single year. So make sure we are your second screen experience here at Fantasy Pros for all things NFL, not just fantasy, but also the NFL draft as well. That'll do it for us, but the story of the game goes on. For Scott Bogman and Pat Fitzmaurice, I'm Joey P. We'll see you next time, kids.